Eğer ki hayatımızda hiç eğer olmasaydı nasıl olurdu? Size şöyle söyleyeyim. Her şey daha az parlak, daha az yeşil olurdu ve daha az parlak yeşil. Çünkü eğerler ormanların derinliklerinde tek bir kibritle devrimlerin kıvılcımını ateşler. Eğerler Nobel ve Guggenheim'ın aklına takılır ve o kodu bu kodu çözerler. Eğerlerle içinizden haykırmak gelir. Eğerler bariyerleri kırar. Asla yalnız yürümezler ve aşırı bulaşıcıdırlar. Eğerler aşikardır ve son anda golü atarlar. Eğerler dünü umursamazlar. Robotlarla bile konuşabilirler. Karşı takım soluklanırken oynamaya durmadan devam ederler. Sadece basit bir kelime öyle mi? Hayır. Eğerler asla uyumazlar. Hep daha fazla çaba gösterirler. Eğerler bakar, araştırır ve en beklenmedik zamanda ortaya çıkarlar. Eğerler klonlanarak çoğalırlar. Acaba gerçekten yapabilir misin? Yaptın bile. Eğerler aklınıza girmeye çalışan güler yüzlü şakacılardır. Eğerler kapıları açarlar. Asla kaybetmeyeceklerini bilirler. Ve biraz gün ışığına her zaman hazırdırlar. Her şey bir eğerle başlar. Çünkü eğerler ne zaman dönüşür, ne zamanlarsa şimdi. Ve şimdi nasıla dönüşür. Nasılsa asıl. Eğerler bakış açınızı değiştirir. Eğerler oyunu değiştirir. Eğerler dünyayı değiştirir. Biliyoruz. Çünkü biz eğerlerle çalışıyoruz. Yakın Doğu Üniversitesi.
Yes, good morning and a very warm welcome to this special public panel discussion that is organized by the Nearest Institute. My name is Mustafa Çıraklı and I'm the director of the Nearest Institute. As many of you will know, we organize a number of events throughout the year to look at those issues that are of relevance to Cyprus and the wider region. And today is indeed a special one because we are going to be tackling precisely one of those issues, and that is the bilateral relations between Israel and Turkey. Now, this has been subject to a rather good discussion in recent years, but more recently, the visit, of course, of Isaac Herzog to Turkey, the first in, I believe, over 12 years by an Israeli head of state to Turkey, has brought the issue once again onto the agendas. And we now may be seeing the prospects for a renewed partnership, dare I say, between Israel and Turkey, a partnership based on dialogue and, of course, collaboration. And this is something that is going to perhaps have important repercussions, implications for the Middle East and the Eastern Mediterranean region. Now, in order to discuss this and the related issues, we are joined by three distinguished guests today, of course. I want to briefly introduce them. So we have Karel Valansi, journalist and researcher, joining us from Istanbul. We have former ambassador, Turkish ambassador, Mr. Mithat Rende, and we also have Dr. Nimrod Goren from Midvim, and joining us from West Jerusalem. I want to thank our guests for coming along. And I would like to start with Karel Valansi, just to highlight and I want to emphasize this, that Karel knows the Turkish public really well, and then she's studied this topic for many years. She completed her BA in Koç University. She wrote her MA thesis then on Turkish-Israeli relations in Kadir Has, and she continues her PhD studies in international relations at the same university. In addition to her academic track, she's been writing for Shalom newspaper as the foreign news editor and a columnist, and she contributes to many other newspapers and journals, including the T24 and Daily Sabah. And she is, above all, the author of the highly successful book, The Crescent Moon and the Magen David, Turkish-Israeli Relations Through the Lens of the Turkish Public, that was published by Hamilton in New York in 2018. But apart from this, she's also contributed to 3 different books on Istanbul and Turkish Jews. And she's also the holder of the Altındağ Short Story Award that was awarded to her in March 2017. So, Karel Valansi, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation.
I mean, I didn't want to dwell too much into the details, but for some, we are now witnessing a new era in Turkish-Israeli relations, and we will be delighted if you could share your thoughts with us on this.
Of course. Thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be among such distinguished speakers. Hello, Nimrod. Merhaba Büyükelçim. Let me start with a quick reminder about bilateral relations between Turkey and Israel. The relations has gone through several ups and downs since ties between the two nations were formalized in March 1949. The Turkish-Israel relationship is sensitive to developments related to the Palestinian territories, especially in Gaza. Additionally, let me say that traditionally, Turkey has seen Israel as a way to reach Washington, to get its voice heard in Washington. So by allying itself with Israel, Ankara expects a kind of support from Washington, or it's a way for reconciliation the Turkish-American relations. Another reminder about the relations, about Turkish-Israeli relations, is that it was not always like that, like the time we witnessed following the Davos incident in 2009 or the Mavi Marmara in May 2010. There were good relations. They even formed an alliance in 1958, Turkey, Israel, and Iran, the Peripheral Pact, the Peripheral Alliance. Well, for Iran, it lasted until 1979. As for Turkey, we saw the emergence of an open and warm relations with Israel in the 1990s due to the positive atmosphere of the Oslo Accords, but also due to the instability in the international arena. Ankara was in search for a new role, new identity, and also new allies in the post-Cold War era, as the importance of Turkey as a reliable ally of the West has diminished all of a sudden. So during the 90s and the beginning of the 2000s, we see multiple visits from presidents and ministers to and from Turkey and Israel. There's a strategic alliance between Turkey and Israel, as Prime Minister Tansu Çiller has said in 1994. But let's not forget that there was always mistrust and suspicions, but also admiration for Israel in the Turkish side. Why admiration? Because for what it accomplished in such an unfriendly environment. Another reminder, Arabs in Turkish perception were those who stabbed the Turks on the back during the Arab revolt against the Ottomans, but the Palestinians are different. They are seen as oppressed Muslim people who need Turkish support and help. So in the 1990s, the relations were based on security, intelligence, and also trade. Trade is an important characteristic of the Turkish-Israeli relations. These relations have started even before the creation of the State of Israel. This is important. Turkey participated in a fair organized by the Jewish Agency in Tel Aviv in 1936, and the Jewish Agency participated in the Izmir Fair for many years, since 1938. There were direct cruises from Turkey to Haifa, and there was a postal agreement just a month after the establishment of Israel. The first Israeli flagged aircraft landed in Istanbul in August 1948 to take the agricultural products exported from Turkey using the passport issued by the British mandate. So pragmatism was always present and the relations were not as bad as we know today, until the normalization. If we fast forward to the 2010, Turkey and Israel succeeded in decoupling economics and politics. So Turkish-Israeli trade relations remarkably survive all activity in the relations. And there were other examples of cooperations as well between Turkey and Israel. For example, in November of 2012, responding to the civil war in Syria, Israel opened a land corridor to allow Turkey to ship its goods from Iskenderun to Haifa and then to the Arab states like Jordan and Saudi Arabia. And incident in March 2016, there was a terrorist attack in Taksim Square, and 3 Israeli citizens were among those killed in this terrorist attack. So Turkey offered all possible assistance to Israel and permitted 2 Israeli army planes to land at the civil airport in Istanbul. In 2016, 6 years after the Mavi Marmara, Israel and Turkey signed a deal to normalize their diplomatic relations. The incentives that encourage this short-lived reconciliation still exist today. Includes strong economic interest, energy, and an energy deal that will facilitate Israel's natural gas export to Europe and reinforce what Turkey always wants to become an energy hub in the region. And additionally, both countries want to improve the humanitarian conditions in Gaza for different reasons. But let me again remind you that the Palestinian factor can always disrupt bilateral relations, as it did in 2018, while Turkey and Israel expelled each other's ambassador because, after United States recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and moved its embassy there, and there was also the protest named as Great March of Return at the Gaza border. So it was a short-lived normalization. But today we see a different rapprochement because, there is a new chapter in Turkish-Israel relations. For over a year, there were positive messages coming, especially from the Turkish side. The anti-Israel rhetoric used by the state's elites, which feeds conspiracy theories and anti-Semitism, has also diminished significantly. Additionally, we saw many news articles expressing the necessity for reconciliation. All these are new. And these are important signs that there is a positive atmosphere, especially from the Turkish side. And we can see in states' elite speeches as well. For example, President Erdogan publicly stated in December last year that even though Turkey could not accept Israel's policy toward the Palestinians, he said, "Our hearts desire that we can move our relations with them to a better point." So this was a really important, strong sign from the Turkish side. And also Erdogan's foreign affairs advisor, Mesut Hakkı, similarly, he said, if Israel comes one step, Turkey may come 2 steps. So if we see a green light, something like that, Turkey will open the embassy and return the ambassadors. So he was saying that we can restore full diplomatic relations again in March. But something bigger happened in March. Well, we were saying that the appointment of ambassador will be a positive step. but well, in March we witnessed a bigger achievement. After months of positive messages, Israeli President Isaac Herzog came to Turkey. The visit is extremely significant. It symbolized that the process of improving the relations has already started. President Herzog came to Turkey 30 years after his father, Haim Herzog, did the same as the president of Israel in 1992. His father was the first president to visit Turkey. So we see that Erdogan received his guests with the highest protocol. We see, after so many years, the Turkish and Israeli flags together again in Ankara. The messages were positive. Leader decided to agree to disagree. This is what we heard during the press conferences. And I'm sorry. Want to continue the dialogue and to solve the problems with dialogue, and as Herzog said during the press conference, we may have disagreements, but we have to solve them with mutual respect, goodwill, and with the proper mechanism and institutions. Let me remind you here the American side of it. There was a phone call between Erdogan following the day after Herzog's Ankara did. It is significant, but because it shows. Can you hear me? Well, the phone call between Biden and Erdogan was significant because it shows the American support to all these developments. But let's not forget that Herzog is the head of state, but not of the government. So he holds a largely ceremonial role. All decisions are made by Bennett's coalition. But Bennett supports Herzog's step because he said that he is of an extraordinary diplomatic value. Next, we will see the visit of Çavuşoğlu, Minister of Foreign Affairs, in May. At first, he declared that he will go with the Energy Minister Fatih Dönmez, but recently he said that he will visit with Hulusi Akar, the Minister of National Security. I believe we can expect a rise in trade volume and collaboration in soft issues such as cultural, social issues, restarting a dialogue that seeks areas of cooperation such as in technology, agriculture, climate change would be a first step, I guess. Cultural exchanges and friendly sports tournaments may be another step. This could help to change the negative public opinion in both countries, and civil society engagement could also help the bilateral ties. As for the political issues, energy is very important, especially for Turkey, who wants to be part of the East Mediterranean Gas Forum. During the press conference again, Erdogan addressed specifically the economic benefits of the rapprochement. On the other hand, Herzog expressed the hope that Ankara would once again become a reliable partner that engage in cooperative, predictable relations with Israel. So they differ in this issue. So I guess confidence building measures are important here. Building back partnership is important, but it requires time and commitment. I stop here and I continue with the questions.
Thank you, Karel, for that excellent overview, I think, of the bilateral relationship, and of course highlighting those issues that may pose perhaps a challenge for the future of this relationship. This is something, of course, I'm sure will come up in the questions later on, in relation to the Palestinian issue, of course. I would like to now turn on to our next guest, and that is Dr. Nimrod Goren, joining us from West Jerusalem. Nimrod is, of course, another expert, I should say, on Turkish-Israeli relations, and he has some impeccable academic and diplomatic credentials. He is the founder of MITVIM and the co-founder of Diplomats, the Council for Mediterranean Diplomacy. He teaches Middle Eastern Studies at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem and is faculty affiliate of Syracuse University's program for the advancement of research on conflict and collaboration. He is also the recipient of Victor J. Goldberg Prize for Peace in the Middle East and the Centennial Medal of the Institute of International Education. He serves on the board of the Center for Enterprising Citizens and on the steering committees of the Geneva Initiative and the Turkish-Israeli Civil Society Forum. Nimrod Goren, thank you so much for coming along. Now, you've heard Karel's take on what's happening on Turkish-Israeli relations. What are your thoughts on this? What's expecting us? What is the view from Israel on all this? What should we expect in relation to how things may develop in the future? The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure being here. And thank you for the invitation. The main points I will try to make is first that Turkey has been important for Israel. The relationship has been significant, not only because of the practical matters, but along the decades when Israel was still very much isolated in the neighborhood, in its region. The model of relation with Turkey was very different than what we had with countries in the Middle East, and gave hope that a different type of regional relationship could take place, as we see now happening with other countries in the Arab world. So that was the historical importance of the relationship. Therefore, rapprochement between Israel and Turkey is a good development, is something that will serve the benefits of both countries, and hopefully will also benefit the region at large. We are at a window of opportunity. There is a positive momentum. We need to act on it rather fast, because both political crisis or potential security escalation can place hurdles on these issues. We look at Israeli politics, Turkish politics, Israeli-Palestinian relations these days are not at their best. So those things can put obstacles on the way to fulfill this potential. And when a new chapter is formally announced between our two countries, I think there's an importance not only to revive the past fields of cooperation, but also to launch a new agenda and find new issues of cooperation that are relevant to topics that are currently dealt with by the countries and the global agenda, whether it's climate change and other issues. So those are the main takeaways with which I will try and begin, picking up on where Karel placed us and identifying why Israel didn't respond favorably until now. Because we heard that Turkey has been signaling to Israel its willingness to improve ties since late 2020. There were messages coming from Ankara, from Istanbul, about an attempt to a bit upgrade the relations. By the way, relations were never officially downgraded in 2018, but just practically they were, according to the Turkish decision at the time. So Turkey wanted to upgrade. Israel was very cautious about that. We had the Netanyahu government at the time. There was no real positive response. There was a lot of skepticism, first about Erdogan taking into account his past statements and reaction to Israel and its actions, the collapse of the 2016 agreement only 2 years later on, some sort of skepticism about what are the reasons for the Turkish move. Is it something that relates to relations with Washington? Where is Turkey positioned geopolitically? So there was a lot of skepticism in the air. And that's why there was no positive response in the first month after Turkey tried and signaled its intent on improving relationship. The change of government in Israel was kind of a game-changing moment, not because it brought to power very pro-Turkish actors in Israeli politics. Actually, the ones leading the Israeli government at the moment in the past were skeptical as well of the prospects of improving relations with Erdogan, whether it's Bennett or Lapid and Lieberman. I think they weren't seeing a rapprochement with Turkey. It's a very feasible option on their government's agenda when they came to power. But yet they were willing to give the process a chance. In Turkey, it was highlighted that there is a new political actors and leadership in Israel that is acting more sensitive, more moderate on the Palestinian issue, with which different type of relationship could evolve. And the channel that began between Presidents Erdogan and Herzog was a very important one. It began just after Herzog was selected or elected as president in June, very close to the establishment of the new government. And what happened was a very gradual process in which mutual trust between the two leaders was built in accordance with a green light from the Israeli government. So Herzog is not an acting politician, he's the president, but he had the backing of the political leadership, and it was in accordance, in cooperation with them. So they had their mutual trust, and channel of communication emerged. Then this channel expanded to other actors in the Israeli political field and in the Turkish one. We saw Bennett and Erdogan speak, we saw Lapid and Cavusoglu speak. So it was not only a single channel, but rather multiple channels emerging. And there was this incident in which an Israeli couple touring Istanbul were detained, which was kind of a very potential negative development for the relationship, but the way it was solved in a positive manner helped resume the trust and cooperation between the state system of both countries, both on the official level, but also on the practical working levels in government officials or government ministries. And that was a good sign of trying to restore the cooperation in practice and seeing that it could work. So all of that lasted for about 9 months. It was a gradual process of trust building. And when that process was seen as successful enough, I think the timing was ripe and ready for the visit by Herzog to Ankara. Herzog was really the right player to do so. He has a lot of experience in regional affairs as a politician. He was advancing relations with Turkey and meeting with Turkish guests in the Knesset. He's a coalition builder. He's a diplomat. So he was really a good fit for leading this process until the time in which the official political levels within the government could take the lead as well. The Herzog visit to Ankara was a very positive one. It got a lot of positive media coverage in Israel. It reflected a very different reality of ties between countries than what Israelis used to see in the news about Turkey and Turkey-Israel relations over the last few years. The public meeting, the flags, the anthem, the warm welcome were all very much appreciated in Israel, and really showed that something is different now. It gave visibility to the process of change, a visibility that we did not see in 2016 when Israel and Turkey signed their previous reconciliation agreement. There was no high-level meeting at the time. There was no really war messaging. This time it was very different, and it was geared to also to convince the public that something is changing. It's also taking place at a time in which Turkey is developing better relations with other countries in the region with which Israel has good relations, whether it's the UAE, and we saw the Erdogan visit there, whether it's Egypt, the ties with which is going slow, but is advancing in terms of Turkey-Egypt relationship. So for Israel, it's also a better and easier regional context to advance relation with Turkey, because it's not seen as something that is necessarily jeopardizing or goes against other important relationships that Israel has in the Arab world. There is sensitivities with Greece and Cyprus, but Israel did convey messages that it's not a zero-sum game. Israel can work in a win-win diplomatic environment, developing ties with Turkey on one hand and maintaining its strong alliance and relationship with the Hellenic states, which Israel values and wants to continue. So that's kind of the context of what is happening until now, with the next step being the move from the more symbolic and public and trust-building process to something that is real political and real life change. So we need now a declaration about the resumption of ties on the ambassadorial level, hopefully the visit by the Turkish foreign minister and the Minister of National Security to Israel, maybe later this month, maybe just after Ramadan. This visit should conclude with a statement in the visit or a bit later that the two countries are resuming their ties at ambassadorial level. President Herzog, when he was in Turkey, was also talking about some mechanism to contain potential differences later on, maybe on the Palestinian issue, to make sure that another escalation between Israel and the Palestinians does not lead the Israel-Turkey relationship to collapse once again. And there was also statements about a possible Erdogan visit to Israel, which of course will be a positive development. Not many Israelis remember that Erdogan was already visiting Israel in 2005 after the Gaza disengagement. And I think if this happens again, it will be a positive development. And in terms of the content of this relationship, once it's being set up, it's important to mix the old and the new. So there's a lot of debate about natural gas export through Turkey to Europe from Israel. I'm not sure how much that is feasible, technically, geopolitically, financially, but the energy is definitely an issue that Israel wants to advance cooperation with Turkey on. President Herzog spelled out a vision for a renewable Middle East, for regional cooperation on climate, environment, renewable energy is also in the East Med. And I think that's something that Israel would like to see, some sort of a new inclusive mechanism taking shape in the Mediterranean, including the different countries and having Turkey an integral part of, not like the situation with the Gazprom, in which Turkey is not a member. The rapprochement between Turkey and the UAE and potentially between Turkey and Egypt could open the road for trilateral cooperation, which could be interesting. Israel, UAE, Turkey, maybe on financial issues, economic issues, but maybe on other topics as well. There is a shared interest in a strategic dialogue, especially on what's going on in Syria, or on Iran, on Russia, Ukraine crisis. I think all of that are geopolitical topics that the two countries have shared interest, at least to coordinate and cooperate and discuss. And there is space, like Karel mentioned, for civil society and civilian cooperation, not only the cultural sport, but also the academia. In the past, there was a center, the Suleiman Demirel Center at Tel Aviv University, which enabled many Israelis to go and study Turkish and spend some time in Turkey. That stopped. I think such a cooperation should be resumed. And also acknowledging the role that civil society actors did play within the troublesome political years between Israel and Turkey. We at Mitvim had a policy dialogue with Turkish partners along the years and still continues. The Turkish-Israel Civil Society Forum tried to bring NGOs together. So there was a lot of space for not only for the business community that continue to work together, also for the civilian actors to try and help this relationship overcome the challenges that it had. And in a way where we can link the Turkish-Israeli relationship into the improving ties of Israel in the Middle East, whether integrating Turkey into some of the working groups that were established after the Negev summit recently in Israel, whether identifying a role, a constructive role for Turkey on the Palestinian issue, which is important for Turkey, which could perhaps help improve Israeli-Palestinian relationship if defined correctly. I think all of that opens up a real potential for a new chapter that is welcomed by the Israeli public opinion. I think Israelis have a positive spot towards Turkey, and even when there were political tensions, the polls that we did at Mitvim generally saw that Israelis want better relations with Turkey and wants their government to try to deliver on that. And happily, this is happening now, and I hope it will be successful. And thank you again for hosting me here with you.
Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Goren, for that overview and sharing your insights with us. Of course, there are, as you highlighted, a number of issue areas that the two countries can indeed come together and work together for the betterment of the region, and to establish a working relationship that could showcase the potential for the regional stability. But there are admittedly some areas that are thornier than others, and energy, I guess, is one of those. Now I want to turn on to our last guest for today, and that is former Turkish ambassador, His Excellency Mr. Mithat Rende. Mithat Rende, of course, served as ambassador and permanent representative of Turkey to the OECD between 2013 and 2016. He was the Turkish ambassador to Doha from 2007 to 2009, where he was also awarded the Sash of Merit by the state of Qatar. Ambassador Rende has also served with the Turkish missions in Damascus, Rome, Brussels, Sofia, Vienna, and London. He has also published in various academic journals and is a regular lecturer at various universities. Ambassador Rende is currently on the governing board of the International Energy Agency and a member of the board of directors of the TSKB. Your Excellency, thank you very much indeed for coming along.
Thank you
today.
Thank you, Mustafa Bey, for your generous introduction, and thank you for your kind invitation. I'm particularly pleased to be with distinguished panelists here on this panel. I'm not a Turkish Israeli expert, in fact, but I had the pleasure of serving in the region with particular interest also to Middle East issues, and also had the opportunity to serve also and deal with East Med issues. So probably this is why you have invited me anyway. With respect to Turkish-Israeli relations, the normalization of relations and the efforts to normalize is a welcome development. And this normalization process it should be taken in stages. It's a process, and it might take time. But we should evaluate it in the context of the changing geopolitical environment in the Middle East, and also the Biden administration's new policy towards the region. So I understand that the United States is also has encouraged many countries, including Turkey, to normalize their relations and to have better relations, and therefore Turkey also has tried to improve its relations and normalize its relations with the United Arab Emirates, with Saudi Arabia, with Egypt, and other countries in the region. So, with respect to Turkish-Israeli relations, I think Karel, my friend Karel Valansi, put it rightly. Our relations has experienced many ups and downs, but they are deep-rooted. And despite certain strains, relations among people, between our people, remain strong. Trade remains strong, and apparently, let's put aside the harsh rhetoric and the exchanges between leaders. It seems that now there is a new atmosphere, and the rhetoric, the harsh rhetoric, has diminished. Both sides have expressed their desire and political will at highest level to normalize relations, and I think both sides have a lot to gain from improved relations. So, in fact, maybe they can start by trying to find a common ground on issues, on less complex issues. It's obvious that both sides are not on the same page with respect to certain regional issues, including the Palestinian issue and the situation probably in Libya, in Syria, and elsewhere, and also in the East Med. Israel has new friends maybe in the Eastern Mediterranean, as was rightly put. They gathered with, they joined forces with Egypt, Greece, the Greek Cypriot administration, and also maybe Jordan, and they established a kind of gas forum, which excluded Turkey from such a regional gathering and regional cooperation. But of course, still there is a room to find, maybe to be more creative now and try to establish a new platforms and invite Turkey, embrace Turkey, and have maybe a more comprehensive, a more
I think His Excellency Ambassador Rende is having some technical difficulties. I'm hoping that he will be back and he will be able to continue his talk. In the meantime, what I suggest we do, I'm just checking, and that we do indeed have several questions that perhaps we could start tackling some of those while we wait for Ambassador Rende. So if I can kindly ask the editor to bring back my guests, because we have a question for each of them indeed. We have a question for Karel, and we also have a question for Nimrod. So if my editor can kindly bring them back in. Ziyaretçilerimizi alalım lütfen. Evet, davetli misafirlerimiz. Right, sorry about this. Like I said, I'm hoping that Ambassador Rende will be able to join us again. But in the meantime, Karel, there's a question for you, and it's on the views of the Turkish Jewish community toward the Cyprus problem, and toward the Turkish Cypriots. Rather interesting one, of course, slightly off the main theme, of course. But I wonder if you would like to just briefly share your thoughts with us on that.
Mustafa Bey, can you hear me?
Your Excellency, you are back. I was a bit worried that you wouldn't be able to join us back again. So we were going to move on to the discussion, but if it's okay with Karel, let's wait and give the floor back to His Excellency, Mr. Mithat Rende. Mr. Mithat Rende, please do continue.
Thank you. So yes, as I said, maybe both sides should, I think, are prepared to normalize and to find a common ground, and just put aside for the time being the more complex and issues. So when we talk about a common ground, it was already also mentioned that we can maybe at this point we can focus on cooperation in the field of technology, in the field of energy, agriculture, climate change, and tourism. And Turkey has always been a good and interesting tourist destination for the Israelis, for Israel and the Israeli people. So I think we should start by sending ambassadors to our capitals, and the representation at ambassadorial level is quite important. Our Israeli friends have expressed their concern about the unpredictable nature of our relations, or maybe sometimes that they are concerned about unexpected statements by the Turkish leadership when the situation in Gaza gets let's say worse, and when there is a kind of operation in Gaza, and then the Turkish leadership might overreact to such operations. It is true, but I understand that the Turkish leadership has been quite careful in their statements, and there is a will to continue with good cooperation with the Israeli side. With respect to the energy, we have heard some very optimistic assessment as regards possible cooperation in the field of energy, and some experts they just believe that it's not a viable solution to build a pipeline. I am quite optimistic about a possible Israeli-Turkish natural gas pipeline. It is true that at this point Israelis are pumping gas to Egypt, but the Egyptian LNG facilities they are limited in their capacity, and probably at a point with the rich resources in Egypt to be utilized and monetized, they might not be able to receive enough Israeli gas. So maybe the Leviathan gas field should be monetized through a pipeline to Turkey, and from Turkey to Europe. I understand that there is a possibility of improving the production capacity from 10 BCM to 20 BCM. That would require a pipeline, and the pipeline will be bankable and economically feasible, I understand. And the Turkish and Israeli private sector are interested in having such a project, in realizing such a project. It is on the agenda of both Israel and Turkey, and in view of the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the war in Ukraine, and especially the changing circumstances in Europe, and the decision by the European Union to reduce their dependence on Russian gas by 2/3, if possible, in a short period of time, then now many energy experts, they just turn their eyes on new projects, including the Israeli-Turkey gas project, and also the Iraq-Turkey gas project. There's another one, but especially if we are to study the Israeli-Turkey natural gas project, what we need is to see if the finances there, and also how we can overcome the political and difficulties and the legal difficulties. We should expect a reaction by the Greek Cypriots. Probably they should be encouraged to engage in cooperation with both sides. Greece might have also their own reservations, because they have also an agreement, NME, that the exclusive maritime zone agreement with Egypt. It won't be that easy, but I think if there is a will on both sides and support by the European Union and the United States for such a project, in order to improve the situation in Europe and to reduce the dependence on Russian gas, then this project should be pursued, and it could be realized in my view. I am maybe cautiously optimistic here, but I think it can be realized, and this would be a kind of a good cooperation, one of the fields where Turkey and Israel could engage with each other. And of course, in addition to energy, I understand that the Minister of Defense is planning to visit Israel, and of course there is another area which is also very promising, which is the defense issues and technology, and especially probably also in addition to technology, agriculture and health and other sectors could also be explored for a start, and then on regional issues and more complex issues, probably in the long run, they can be dealt with also. Should I stop here and see if there is any question, or Mustafa Bey? I would be more than happy to answer any question which might be put to the panel.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency, for sharing your thoughts and your reflections with us. And I'm sure we are going to be having quite a few questions on this last point that you mentioned on the possible pipeline project between the two countries. So I just want to have a quick skim through the questions. If we can take the other guests as well, because there's it looks like there are questions for each of them. Now, just before His Excellency came back on the show, I was talking to Karel Valansi, and there was a question for her, a rather specific question on the Turkish Jews and the views on the Cyprus problem and the relations with the Turkish Cypriot community. What's your take on this, Karel? Do you want to share your thoughts very briefly on this?
Yes, of course. It's a difficult question because I don't know the answer. I really don't know how the Turkish Jewish community sees the Cyprus problem or the Cypriots in general. But what I know is that it's a nice place to go to visit. It's a tourist destination for the Turkish Jews. I know that. And I have friends there, so I want to say hello to Sercal if he's looking at, he's watching this. But I can also say that Turkish Jewish community is mostly apolitical, so I'm not sure if even if they follow the news, they will not share their thoughts. I think so. So they are apolitical, and not everybody is the same. We are like 15,000, so everybody may think differently.
Thank you.
May
Thank
I-
you so much.
May I add one point to Karel's assessment?
Please do.
I also have Turkish friends of Jewish origin, and they are mainly they are business oriented people, as Karel rightly put it. They are apolitical, but they would be definitely very pleased to see relations improved between the two countries. Normally, they are not. They are business oriented. They are very successful business people. And they follow, of course, they follow international issues, events, and closely follow what's happening in the Middle East. But they're not active politicians, or they don't actively participate in the debate with respect to Turkish-Israeli relations.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. I have a question for Nimrod here. I'm just sort of skimming through both from YouTube comments and from our social media about the repercussions of the recent domestic political developments, Nimrod, in Israel on the rapprochement. I think this refers to the change in government, I believe. Would you like to elaborate on this a little? What was the role of the sort of the domestic political developments on Israeli foreign policy in general, but more specifically on this recent rapprochement between Turkey and Israel?
Sure. So what we saw a few days ago was a defection of one of the coalition members to the opposition, meaning that the current Israeli government, which is a very diverse government, it's including parties from left to right, including for the first time an Arab Muslim party. So the government does not have a majority anymore. It's a 60-60 tie in parliament. It doesn't have any political immediate consequences. So the government is not toppled. There is no early election decided upon. It can ignite a process leading to that a bit later on, but we're not sure of that yet. And at the moment, nothing like that is happening on the immediate term. So I don't think that should be a consideration in relation to the process between Israel and Turkey. It is an indicator that political instability could come back to Israel. You know, we had a few years in which we had repeat election cycles with difficulty to form a government. But as we see now, the rapprochement with Turkey is not an issue of one political camp against the other. So it's being led or supported by ministers and people from the left or center-left part of the government, and also from the right-wing part of the government. So it's not something that the two blocs will fight each other on when the time comes. It's out of a very realistic, I think, perspective about the benefit of it, seeing it in the context of Israel improving relations that were damaged during the years of Netanyahu in power, seeking to improve Israel's standing in the Middle East and the surrounding region, in the Mediterranean. I think this process should go on, and we should not let these political changes become a stumbling block in the rapprochement effort between Israel and Turkey.
Excellent, thank you. The next one is for Ambassador Rende. Well, it's on the impact of the Turkish-Israeli rapprochement on the Israeli policies toward the Turkish Cypriot community and the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus. This, I think, can go both ways, but I wonder if we could ask Mithat Rende what his take be on whether this rapprochement can or whether this rapprochement would have any repercussions for the Cyprus problem, or perhaps the wider engagement with the Turkish Cypriots. But I think Ambassador Rende is once again having some technical difficulties. So never mind. I want to go back to Karel. There's another question here on the Palestinian issue with the upcoming presidential elections in Turkey next year. Do you think that this issue could flare up once again and be used in the electoral campaigns as a bit of a I'm not sure what they are saying there, but would you see that kind of a possibility of an anti-Israeli rhetoric once again spilling onto the electoral agendas?
Well, it is a possibility because it brings many people from different perspectives together. I mean, the Palestinian issue is something beyond the parties, beyond how can I say? The Turkish public is sensitive to the Palestinian issue, so it may be used to get votes. It may be used by the opposition. I'm not sure if it may be used by President Erdogan, because now he's saying he's acting. I mean, I think that it is always a possibility. I think that the opposition may use it. I don't think that President Erdogan and AKP will use it, but you never know. Because it has the voting potential. I mean, there are sensitivities in the Turkish public on that issue.
Sure, thank you. And if I can take that last question that I was asking Ambassador Rende, and perhaps get Nimrod's, Dr. Nimrod Goren's thoughts on this. And in fact, it's a two-part question. In the first part, it says, considering the thousands of Israeli tourists are visiting North Cyprus annually, and Israeli investors buying houses and real estate properties, what can be the impact of Turkish-Israeli rapprochement on the Israeli policies toward the Turkish Cypriot community? Is this something that you'd like to elaborate on or have a go at, Nimrod?
Sure, and I'll take this question and the one you forward to the ambassador before and try to combine them. First, when it comes to tourism, we are just about to celebrate Pesach in Israel, and after 2 years of COVID or more, Israelis are once again flying abroad in large numbers. And you see Antalya coming back to the tourism map. And you see people feeling at ease again to go to Turkey. This is something that wasn't happening over the last few years. So I think the tourism issue is definitely picking up pace. I hope we'll see Turkish tourists and tourists from Cyprus come to Israel as well. I don't think the change of relation between Israel and Turkey will immediately be felt in northern Cyprus. I think the sensitivity that Israel has towards its relations with Greece and Cyprus and the wish to maintain those relations and to signal to those countries that things are not changing with them will limit the motivation by the Israeli leadership to start taking steps towards the Turkish community as a first phase. There could be things that will evolve over time. For example, to have some more diplomatic engagement, whether formal or non-formal, between the sides, to maybe find ways to ease some of the difficulties for Israeli tourism or visitors or investors in the northern part of the island. Also, given what we see recently between Russia and Ukraine, and we see Israel, much like Turkey, trying to mediate in a conflict that it's not its own conflict. Turkey tried to do that in the past in different conflicts. For Israel, it's almost the first time ever. Israel never thought about itself as a mediator state, and perhaps there could be something that Israel could do to maybe improve relations between Turks and Greeks in Cyprus, or maybe help bring Cyprus Turkey, Greece, all together under some mechanism like Ambassador Rende mentioned in terms of renewable energies and others. So that may be some of the issues that could be relevant. And I would also like to add a word to what Karel said on the Palestinian issue, because it was important, I think, yesterday to hear the Turkish foreign minister remark about the Palestinian support for the rapprochement between Turkey and Israel. That it is not seen as something that Turkey is doing against the will of the Palestinian Authority, but rather is something that is being seen as a positive step that can later may increase the Turkish ability to play a role in advancing Israeli-Palestinian peace. And that's, I think, a very positive framing to have that I hope will be maintained.
Thank you, Dr. Goren, for your take on that issue. Do you think, and this is my question, using the power of the chair, do you think there is a Ukrainian factor in all this, and then perhaps a Russian factor, whether a Russian factor could come into play, because both countries, both Turkey and Israel, have tried to maintain good relations with Russia. So just sort of thinking whether that could be a factor to watch out for, but at the same time whether the Ukrainian issue, how does that play into all this between the two countries, the rapprochement between the two countries? Do you think that we could see the rapprochement independently of what's happening in the Ukraine?
I think we can. It began before, much before actually this process, so it wasn't something that began as a consequence of. It does put Israel and Turkey all of a sudden in the same boat of mediator states, and I know that when Herzog went to Ankara, that was something on his talking point that he wanted to discuss the attempts that both countries are doing in order to restore peace. Both countries are also doing this balancing act, finding the way to be supportive of the Ukrainians, critical of the Russians, but not too much. I think Russia in the past was a concern for Israel and Turkey. When Russia entered the situation in Syria more significantly, both Israel and Turkey saw it as an issue that they could speak about together and are jointly concerned regarding which. So I think it's not as if Russia can help bring the countries together, but it creates a new topic for the strategic dialogue between Israel and Turkey to deal with, because Russia is active in our neighbor Syria, a country that both of Turkey and Israel have interest in and needs to be dealing with. So I think that's my take on that.
Thank you.
I can also add that both Turkey and Israel positioned themselves as a neutral side and have a balanced position in the war in Ukraine. And they were in the same side, in the same page in the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict last year. And they were both were cautious about Syria, the war in Syria, and Israel said that we have a new neighbor in Syria. It was Russia, so they have to have good relations with Syria. And as a mediator, while Turkey is hosting the meeting, and Israel is like a facilitator transferring the messages. So they have common interests and they are in the same page in many conflicts in the region.
Thank you. And let's take the last question. Again, I would like to pose this to both of you. Would it be in the interests of Israel to act as a facilitator between between Turkey and Greece, and Turkish and Greek Cypriots, for a more inclusive and comprehensive framework in the Eastern Mediterranean region? So talking about the arbitrator, the taking neutral position and so on, and looking at it more specifically in the case of Israel, could we take this beyond and say that Israel could play that kind of a role in helping Turkey and Greece mend their fences, and also helping the Turkish Cypriots and the Greek Cypriots for a comprehensive and inclusive framework? Shall we start with you, Nimrod?
Okay. I think diplomacy is good, okay? And what we saw between Israel and Turkey is that diplomacy works, and that countries that had tensions for years can put them aside and open a new chapter. and the valuing of the essence of diplomacy that we see in Israel, also because of the Abraham Accords and the new regional dynamics that are evolving, could be leveraged to other places as well. I'm not sure how effective Israeli mediation at the moment could be in order to resolve the Cyprus conflict or to resolve the long-standing tensions between Turkey and Greece. I think that should be nevertheless explored. What is the specific role, a very tangible thing that Israel can contribute, much like the other way around, thinking about what Turkey and Cyprus can contribute to Israeli-Palestinian peacemaking. So the notion as the Mediterranean consolidated and the East Med becomes a space of more dialogue and less conflict is about how countries in the region can support each other on the way to conflict resolution. It doesn't have to be official levels at first. It could be even hosting track 2 meetings, taking into account some of the conflict resolution knowledge that has been developed within the Israeli and Palestinian peace-building community over the last 20, 30 years. I'm sure there are lessons from Cyprus that are relevant to us. But I think this connection between people who are working to resolve conflicts, who have the interest, the political or the professional interest to do so, these linkages should be made and intensified, seeking together real tangible roles that the countries can do officially to help advance peace in the region. That will benefit us all.
Thank you.
And I can add that well, it's early to talk about a mediation on the Cyprus issue, but I can say that an improvement between the relations between Turkey and Israel should not mean a downgrade in Israel's relation with Greece. So it is better for all to cooperate together, that there is improvement between the relations between Greece and Turkey. The Prime Minister of Greece visited Turkey, and Turkey is changing its foreign policy track. So there is an improvement with many countries, including Armenia, Egypt, and many other countries in the Middle East. So I believe that in both energy and security relations, thinking about all those relations, I think that an improvement between Israel and Turkey will improve the relations between Turkey and Greece. And yes, and that's it.
Thank you.
Dr. Çıraklı, I just want to add an example because more than a decade ago, I was going with a group of Israeli and Palestinian students to Cyprus, and we met students from the Turkish and the Greek side who were engaging in conflict resolution process of their own. And you saw 4 groups of different people in conflicts trying to sit together and share best practices and find ways forward. It was an interesting difference at the time. While the Israeli and Palestinians really wanted to speak about politics and about the issues that are dividing them, the Cypriots wanted to talk about their shared culture, shared heritage, shared history, shared future. So the dynamics at the time were very different, but it was so valuable to meet with people from your island and discuss ways to promote peace together.
Thank you so much. And on that positive note, I'm afraid we are out of time. And I just got a message from Ambassador Rende expressing his gratitude and also saying that he will not be able to. He's having some major difficulties with his internet connection. So hopefully we'll be able to host him again at a different time. But I'd like to thank my guests, Ms. Karel Valansi and Dr. Nimrod Goren. Thank you so much for agreeing to come along. It's been a pleasure talking with you and on this issue, such an important one for the region, for all our countries and for all our people. And let's hope that dialogue, of course, trumps, and it does have the potential to perhaps change the faith of the whole region that has for too long been known for conflict and instability. So let's keep fingers crossed on that. So thank you very much indeed to my guests, and thank you very much indeed to our audience for watching us, and we hopefully will be seeing you at another panel sometime in the future. Thank you and see you again.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Eğer ki hayatımızda hiç eğer olmasaydı nasıl olurdu? Size şöyle söyleyeyim. Her şey daha az parlak, daha az yeşil olurdu ve daha az parlak yeşil. Çünkü eğerler ormanların derinliklerinde tek bir kibritle devrimlerin kıvılcımını ateşler. Eğerler Nobel ve Guggenheim'ın aklına takılır ve o kodu bu kodu çözerler. Eğerlerle içinizden haykırmak gelir. Eğerler bariyerleri kırarlar. Asla yalnız yürümezler ve aşırı bulaşıcıdırlar. Eğerler aşikardır ve son anda golü atarlar. Eğerler dünü umursamazlar, robotlarla bile konuşabilirler. Karşı takım soluklanırken oynamaya durmadan devam ederler. Sadece basit bir kelime öyle mi? Hayır. Eğerler asla uyumazlar. Hep daha fazla çaba gösterirler. Eğerler bakar, araştırır ve en beklenmedik zamanda ortaya çıkarlar. Eğerler klonlanarak çoğalırlar. Acaba gerçekten yapabilir misin? Yaptın bile. Eğerler aklınıza girmeye çalışan güler yüzlü şakacılardır. Eğerler kapıları açarlar. Asla kaybetmeyeceklerini bilirler. Ve biraz gün ışığına her zaman hazırdırlar. Her şey bir eğerle başlar. Çünkü eğerler ne zaman dönüşür, ne zamanlarsa şimdi. Ve şimdi nasıla dönüşür. Nasılsa asıla. Eğerler bakış açınızı değiştirir. Eğerler oyunu değiştirir. Eğerler dünyayı değiştirir. Biliyoruz. Çünkü biz eğerlerle çalışıyoruz. Yakın Doğu Üniversitesi.